Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Child of Prophecy, the Tirumfall Trilogy Book 2 by J. Drew Brumbaugh, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Gant stood near the window that had been so graciously opened for him by the massive tree where he and Delphinia lived. He thought about the magical way the tree she called it Sprout cared for them. He wasn't sure how old the huge oak was. Certainly, it had been hundreds of years since it was an acorn. It had such a powerful intrinsic bond with Gant's wife, Delphenia, that it configured its limbs, branches, and leaves into a comfortable home. Seats, beds, furniture, and even the window in front of him were formed to suit the wishes of his wife, which wasn't surprising since woodland nymphs held powerful symbiotic connections with trees, plants, and the forest wildlife. And the longer Gant lived with Delphinia, the stronger the connection between the tree and Gant had grown. It was as if the ancient oak could read his mind, and then it did everything within its power to meet his wishes. Unnerving at times, but Gant wouldn't trade this tree for anything. Right now, Gant stared anxiously out the window at the path that stretched away into the forest. What bothered him was that the path was empty. He worried that Pris had forgotten his promised visit. Gant knew the Emperor was busy, but that usually did not preclude him from making the trip. Gant and Delphinia had offered to come to the capital to celebrate Pris completing the next step in his magical training, but the young Emperor wouldn't hear of it. It was so much easier for him to come to them now that his magical training had advanced to the point where he could transport himself. Pris also admitted that he liked the freedom, no guards, no ministers, no advisors. Gant stalked around the living room and then returned to the window to peer out toward the forest path. He ran one hand through his shoulder-length light brown hair, smoothing the tangles. This morning he'd been too anxious to comb it. Waiting for his friend, Gant thought about how they'd met, how they'd joined forces to stop the demon Varg and his minions of darkness, and how they'd help close the portal to the Dark Realms. Nearly 4 years had passed, and the stalemate between the forces of good and evil remained. If it weren't for the monolith mountains separating the two, well, Gant didn't want to think about the consequences. A loud knock at the door startled Gant. He started toward the door, and the interlaced limbs that meshed tightly to form the door slowly retracted. In the opening stood Pris, a childish grin on his face. Gant remembered when they'd first met. The Emperor was hardly more than a boy, and barely up to Gant's shoulder. Now he was nearly a head taller and growing into manhood. He'd put on muscle, though compared to Gant's muscular frame, the Emperor was still thin and wiry. "Ha!" snapped Pris, stepping into the living room. "Looking for me on the trail, weren't you?" "Of course," said Gant, and hugged his friend. "I didn't use the trail," said Pris, obviously satisfied with himself. "I know your home so well, I just transported right to the doorstep." Gant waved for Pris to sit on one of the limbs that formed a chair. "Isn't that dangerous?" "Only if you aren't sure where you're going, although distance is a limiting factor. I am getting better. It only took 4 jumps this time, and I managed it all in the same day. The last one right to your doorstep. I know your house nearly as well as my own." 4 jumps in one day? I thought that was impossible," said Gant, and Gant noticed the deep bags under Pris's blue eyes. "You look really tired." Pris sighed. "I am exhausted. 4 jumps is a strain for anyone. Many can't do more than 3, so normally you'd be right. But Abydus taught me a variation that reduces the strain." Pris glanced around. "Where's Delphinia?" "Out in the orchard with Seth. She likes to sit outside with him, says it's important for his development. She'll be up soon." "And how is Seth? He's what, 2 now?" 2 in a month, said Gant, smiling. He couldn't believe he was a father. It was a miracle. And they'd had a boy, which was even more of a miracle. He would have said more about his son, but Gant noticed the weary look in Pris's eyes. "You are tired. Are things in the capital wearing you down?" "It is a lot busier than here, but I'll tell you, it's all mundane stuff. People arguing about trade rights, building rights, police protection, corruption, family squabbles. And they all think I should solve their problems. I'd rather be off adventuring with you." "Doing what?" "Taking back the Western Kingdoms. As long as Varg's minions and the religious fanatics in Skull's Land rule there, I don't sleep at night." Gant retrieved the pitcher of sun tea sitting out and poured 2 glasses. He handed one to Pris. What are you worried about? They are a long way from the Empire, and so far they haven't tried to cross the mountains. No, but they will. The only thing holding them back is their own internal fighting. There's no leadership. 2 demons, one in Pogar and one in Ferd, who can't get along. As long as Gargosh and Belgosh keep feuding, we're safe. If they ever unite, things will change. Why wait for that? I think we should attack. With what troops? Both of them have gotten reinforcements from the dregs of mankind. Where would we find enough manpower to attack them on their side of the mountains? That is the problem. On this side, we have the strength to hold our positions, but attacking them in their fortifications would be suicidal. Then what are you suggesting? I don't know. It just worries me. Ah, but it's good to see you again, nonetheless, said Gant, raising his glass to salute his friend. Pris took a sip. He sighed and held the glass up to the light to admire the tea's color. I forget how delicious Delphinia's sun tea is. What does she put in it? Flowers and things? I don't know. It's enchanted, replied Gant, a reminder that Delphinia was no ordinary woman. They each took another sip. Gant sat down in his favorite spot. Pris leaned back in his chair. And how are your magical studies? Asked Gant. Rumor has it that you were doing so well one day you'll sit on the Council of 5. I wish that could be so. I have a lot to learn yet, he said with a grimace. I don't think it's possible to be Emperor and sit on the Wizards' Council at the same time. Why not? Where would I find the time to do justice to either position? I suppose you have a point. So, get married, have an heir, turn the throne over to him, and get on with being the wizard you want to be. There's an idea. Now to find a woman who'd have me. Gant laughed. Plenty of women would be happy to have you as long as the throne comes with it. You need a woman who is actually interested in you. There is that. There were no footsteps on the stairs, no warning at all, but the door opened and Delphinia entered. She was tall, beautiful, her hair green-brown like her forest. She carried Seth in her arms, the boy squirming to be put down. Gant loved her more now than when he'd been under her spell, and seeing his son brought a wide smile to his face. Seth had caused quite a stir when he was born. Woodland nymphs like Delphinia seldom, if ever, bore sons. They always had daughters to carry on the care of the forest. Seth was an anomaly, and Gant was all the more proud for it. Delphinia put Seth down and went straight to Pris. She kissed him on the forehead. Wonderful to see you, she said with a smile that always sent chills down Pris's back. I need a woman like her, laughed Pris and rose to hug Delphinia. Glad you finally got here, she said, her voice musical and joyous. My husband was about to wear a hole in the floor. Will you be staying tonight? I certainly plan to. Even my meddling ministers can get along without me for one night. At that moment, tiny dots of golden light began to appear up near the ceiling. The swirling pinpoints circled and coalesced into a writhing ball of iridescent particles that settled lower and lower until the sphere hovered midway between the floor and ceiling. Suspended in the center of the room, the radiance congealed into a glowing sphere of cold white fire. Inside the globe, a woman appeared dressed in white, so pure, so perfect, so flawless. She stepped from the brilliance into the room. Taller than even Pris, she was slender yet with a mystical strength about her. In her blue eyes was a sense of timeless knowledge. She wore a white gown so bright that they could not look directly at her. It was as if the sun had entered the house and this woman stood directly in its center. Gant regained his composure first. I know you, he managed. Yes, Gant, you do know me. We met last in Pogar Tower when I came for my son's body. What do you want? Asked Pris. She smiled, dazzling, radiant, marvelous. I do more than retrieve the dead. I bring a warning. A child will be born in Scotsland, a child of evil who will bring death and ruin to the world. This child will unite the minions of darkness in the west and lead them into the east to bring destruction to all you hold dear. Can't you do something about it? Asked Pris. I I have no power over such things. I am limited in this plane. Perhaps you can do something to prevent this." "How do you know this?" asked Delphinia. "I can see things that you cannot." "What can we do?" asked Pris. "That is for you to decide." "Where will the child be born?" asked Delphinia. "How will we know it?" "The child will be born on the next night of darkness to a scullery maid working in the temple of the Skalsland priests. She is not aware of what they did to her. She was drugged and given to Balgash for pleasure. Now she bears a child destined to destroy all that is good. She will unite your enemies." "Do you know where the birth will take place?" "Only that it will be in the main temple in Ferd." Gant knew of Ferd, capital of Skalsland, a place that used to be the home of staunch allies, a proud warrior race, and a dedicated religious order who were always willing to fight for justice. Now the good priests had been nearly eradicated by the dark forces that had taken control. A handful of the brave priests had escaped to the east, where Pris had given them asylum within the Eastern Empire, leaving only evil priests that worshipped darkness in control of Skalsland. Before they could ask her anything more, the shimmering pinpoints of light swirled, dimmed, and dissipated. The woman's shape flickered and wavered, and in a moment was gone. Gant shook his head. Not much to go on. Delphinia studied Gant and Pris for a long moment. "How do you know this woman? And why should we trust her?" Gant swallowed hard. "She is Andinar's mother. She appeared in the tower in Pogor the night we killed Varg to claim her son's body." Pris nodded and then added, "We asked Yurik about her, and he isn't sure who she is. Angel, goddess, or one of the Tirumfall 5. But she has power. She restored both of our swords in the tower that night after Varg had drained them of magic." Delphinia pursed her lips. "If we believe her, then what?" "We have to do something," said Gant. "We can't let evil unite against us." Pris sat down heavily. "No, we can't. It is my worst nightmare." His brow wrinkled in thought. "Fine place to have a baby, that temple of scum. With the high priest hanging around and all the guards, how can we get in there?" Delphinia shuddered. "You can't be thinking about preventing the birth or killing the child, can you?" "Of course not," said Gant. "We don't do things like that." Pris reddened slightly. "I didn't mean we should kill the child, but we'll have to get in there and do something. Maybe kidnap it." "And do what then?" asked Gant. "Raise it ourselves," said Delphinia. Gant's eyebrows lifted. "Raise it? Who?" "You and me," said, and Delphinia smiled as if her idea was not only obvious, but perfect. "Seth needs a brother, and you and I won't be having more children anytime soon." "Or we could take it to my castle, and I could have nursemaids look after the child," suggested Pris. "I think we'll need to nurture this child more carefully than nursemaids can do," said Delphinia. "Remember, his father is a demon, and he isn't likely to change easily. Gant and I are the perfect ones to do it, especially with Seth as a role model. What better home could there be?" "How about the dark elves? They've got evil blood in their veins, and they've been able to resist it." Gant paced to the table and leaned on it. "I agree with Delphinia. If we can kidnap the child and bring him here to her enchanted wood, the goodness that flows around here just might change him enough to change his destiny, his character, even his heart." "Okay," agreed Pris. "So all we have to do is sneak into the darkest evil temple in the world, right past hundreds of armed guards, steal the child even with a crowd standing around watching it being born, and bring it back here so you can raise it. I certainly hope you've got a different plan than the frontal assault we used in Pogor Tower." Gant laughed. "No, I don't have any plan right now. But we've got time. When is the next night of darkness?" "Both moons will be new in about 2.5 months. "Not much time," said Delphinia. "We'll come up with something. In the meantime, I've got supper ready, and I think food is just what we need." "When in doubt, eat," said Pris. "That's the motto I use whenever anyone presents me with a problem that I have no idea how to answer. Eating gives me time to think, and no one has the guts to tell me I can't eat when I want to, so it always works." And eat they did. But the conversation was vastly different than what Gant and Delphinia had planned. The joy was gone, replaced by somber visions of evil overrunning their world. Despite the marvelous food, despite the wine and dessert, despite Seth's smile and enthusiasm for dinner, they could not bring themselves to think about anything but the evil child. By the end of the evening, they still had no plan. They finally went to bed, weary and tired. Sprout, the great tree Delphinia and Gant lived in, pulled in its branches and tightened up the leaf canopy to shield them from the night breezes. They still did not rest peacefully.